There are dialogues that happen in total silence. Entire conversations constructed word by word, rehearsed with precision, felt with intensity and never spoken. The other side never hears. The world never knows. But within the mind, every reply has been given, every argument has been won, every emotion has been processed to the last trace. These conversations are not fantasies. They are mental rehearsals of something that may or may not happen.
They are ways of organizing thoughts that have not yet found a voice. They are battles fought in silence, where the only opponent is hesitation itself. If any part of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. And if at any point you feel like sharing your experience, the comments are open. What happens when the most important conversation of the day is constantly on your mind? The entire conversation takes place in silence, while the world continues on, oblivious. The table is quiet. The people around you talk about simple, trivial, safe things. You respond when necessary, smile when appropriate, but inside you're somewhere else. There's a conversation happening long, dense, full of nuances, and no one but you knows about it. It's as if two versions of you exist at the same time, one that participates in the visible world, and another that organizes words that will never be heard. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the mind's way of processing something that doesn't yet have a form. Maybe it's something you need to say, but don't know how. Maybe it's something you want to hear, but can't ask. The silent conversation fills the space between what you feel and what you can't yet express. And meanwhile, the world continues without noticing your absence. There's something about this kind of silence that's almost comforting, as if the mind needs this inner space to function, as if rehearsing were a way of existing that doesn't require witnesses. And then you realize, perhaps the most honest conversation you had today was precisely that one, the one no one heard. The words are repeated in the head until they sound too certain to exist. The phrase is simple. You repeat it mentally, adjust the tone, change a word, you test another version. It needs to sound natural, but firm. It needs to convey exactly what you want to say, without room for misunderstanding. Then you rehearse again and again, until the phrase ceases to be spontaneous and becomes a scripted piece, polished, rehearsed, too perfect to be real. That's where something strange happens. The more you repeat those words in your mind, the less you can imagine them being said aloud. They become so secure inside your head that the risk of releasing them into the world seems too great. What if the tone doesn't come out as you planned? What if the other person reacts in a way you didn't foresee? The perfect phrase, rehearsed to exhaustion, ends up trapped precisely because it's too perfect. What should facilitate communication ends up creating more distance, because reality never follows the script. And perhaps the mind knows this. That's why it keeps rehearsing, postponing, refining, not out of fear of what to say, but out of fear that the real world will never match the version you've built inside. Deep down, you know, some words exist better in the silence of thought than in the risk of speech. Responses are rehearsed for situations that may never happen. You prepare arguments for confrontations that don't yet exist. You organize defensive phrases for accusations no one has made. You construct sharp rebuttals for hypothetical situations that may or may not materialize. The mind works as if it were assembling a war strategy, except the battlefield is imaginary and the enemy is a projection of what could happen. It's not paranoia. It's emotional preparation. It's the mind's way of dealing with uncertainties before they become real. You rehearse the difficult conversation with your boss, the response to that complicated message, the explanation you might need to give. And even knowing that the situation may never happen, you feel a strange relief in being ready, as if having the right words saved is already a form of control. But there's a downside to that too, because living through situations that don't exist drains energy that could be used for real situations. The mind tires of battles that were never fought, and when the conversation finally happens, if it happens at all, it rarely follows the script you rehearsed for so long. Still, you keep rehearsing, because maybe it's not about being right. Maybe it's just about not being caught off guard. The internal dialogue chooses the perfect tone that will never be used. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. The tone needs to be firm, but not aggressive, clear, but not cold, honest, but not brutal. You test variations in your head: a softer voice, a strategic pause, a look that accompanies the words. Every detail is calculated to convey exactly the right intention, and mentally, it works perfectly. But the voice you rehearse internally is never the same as the one that comes out, because the body doesn't obey the mind's script. Your throat tightens, the tone comes out more tense than you planned, or too soft when it should be firm. The pauses that seemed elegant in thought become uncomfortable silences in reality, and you realize, too late, that the control you had in mental rehearsal doesn't exist in the real world. There's something frustrating about it, knowing exactly how you want it to sound and not being able to materialize that version, as if there's a lost translation between thought and speech, as if the person you are inside is more articulate, more courageous, more precise than the one that emerges when the words finally need to exist. Perhaps that's why so many conversations continue to happen only in the mind, because there, the tone is always perfect, and no one has to deal with the imperfection of being heard. The mind creates versions of the other just in order to be able to respond to them. You don't talk to yourself. You talk to an imagined version of someone, a projection that acts, reacts, and responds the way you expect or fear. This version isn't the real person. It's a mental construct based on patterns, memories, and assumptions, and yet you converse with it as if you were face to face with the real person. The imagined version says things the real person might never say. It raises objections you anticipate, asks questions you foresee, reacts in ways you've already mapped out, and you respond to all of it. You defend your point of view, justify your choices, explain your intentions. The dialogue flows as if it were real, but it's just you talking to a projected echo of someone who exists outside your mind. The problem is that this imagined version is never completely reliable. It's filtered through your insecurities, your expectations, your fears. And when the real conversation finally happens, the person on the other end almost always surprises you because they didn't follow the script you rehearsed, because they are more unpredictable, more human, more complex than any version you managed to create. But until then, you're still conversing with ghosts, because sometimes it's easier to control the conversation when the other person is just a projection of yourself. Emotions are felt in advance, even though nothing has been said. The conversation hasn't happened yet, but you already feel its weight. The frustration of not being understood, the relief of finally saying what you need to say, the anger at a response that hasn't yet come. All of this surges through your chest before a single word is even spoken. It's as if your body can't differentiate between what was experienced and what was merely imagined. You feel your heart race as you rehearse a confrontation that may never happen. You feel the tension in your shoulders as you anticipate a negative reaction. You even feel the exhaustion that would come after an argument that exists only in your mind. Emotions don't wait for reality to manifest. They arrive along with thoughts, as if imagination were enough to activate everything the body would hold back for the real moment. And there's something exhausting about that, because you experience the situation twice, once in your mind, once in real life. Or worse, you only experience it in your mind, expending all your emotional energy, and the real situation never arrives. You become exhausted from internal battles that no one saw, wounded by words that no one said, relieved by resolutions that never happened. Perhaps that's why some conversations weigh so heavily even before they happen, because the body has already lived every second of them, even if the world doesn't know anything yet. The relief comes from winning an argument that only existed internally. You finish the mental dialogue and feel something close to victory. The arguments were sharp. The answers were precise. Each objection was dismantled with clarity. The other person, or the version of them that you created, had no counter-argument. You won. And even knowing that none of this was real, there is a genuine relief. As if the mind needed this resolution, even if imaginary, to move forward. It doesn't matter that no one heard. It doesn't matter that the conversation never left your head. Inside, something was resolved. You organized your thoughts, validated your feelings, found the right words, and that, in some strange way, is enough, because what you were seeking perhaps wasn't to convince the other person, it was to convince yourself. It was to prove, even if only to yourself, that your reasons make sense. But there's a dark side to this relief, because it can become a substitute if you resolve everything internally, the real conversation loses its urgency. Why risk the discomfort of the outside world if your mind has already offered the peace you needed? And so, little by little, you may begin to prefer silent victories, those that no one questions, because no one participates. In the end, you carry resolutions the world has never seen, and you wonder if that's clarity or just a sophisticated way to avoid real confrontation. Simple phrases gain weight because they never leave our thoughts. There are words you carry around for days, sometimes weeks. Short, direct phrases that should be easy to say but remain stuck. I need to talk to you. This bothered me. I'm not feeling well. The longer they stay stored away, the heavier they become. What should be simple turns into a dense burden, laden with meanings you, yourself, added while postponing it. The phrase grows from within. You revisit it every day, add context, imagine reactions, calculate consequences. It ceases to be just a sentence and transforms into something bigger, an event, a rupture, a milestone. And the more you postpone it, the more impossible it seems to say it. Because now it's not just about the words, it's about everything you've built around them while they remain silent. And there's a cruel irony in that. If you had said it on impulse, perhaps it would have just been a conversation, quick, honest, resolved, but you held back. You rehearsed, you perfected, and now those simple words carry the weight of all the time you spent not saying them. They've become too big to fit into a casual conversation. Perhaps that's why so many important things are never said, not because they are difficult to formulate, but because they have been thought about for too long. The body reacts to a conversation that no one heard. You finish the mental dialogue and realize you're tense. Your shoulders are hunched, your jaw clenched, your breathing shorter, as if you'd just come out of a real confrontation. But there was no confrontation, there was no conversation. It was all internal, and yet your body responded as if every word had been shouted aloud. It's not imagination. The body doesn't distinguish between what happened and what was intensely thought about. The adrenaline rises in the same way. The heart races in the same way. Muscle tension sets in as if you were actually facing the situation you rehearsed. And when you return to reality, you realize you spent physical energy in a battle that never existed outside your mind. There's something unsettling about that, because it means you can wear yourself out without ever having acted. You can feel the exhaustion of an argument that never happened. You can carry the tension of conflicts that remain hypothetical, and the body pays the price even if the world around you remains calm, oblivious to everything you've just experienced internally. Perhaps that's why you sometimes feel exhausted for no apparent reason, because your body knows about the conversations you've had in silence, and it reacted to each one of them even if no one else noticed. In the end, external silence conceals long-standing battles already concluded in the mind. When the conversation finally happens, if it happens at all, it rarely lasts as long as it did in your head. A few minutes, maybe, words exchanged, reactions observed, and that's it. It's over. But inside, that conversation had already happened dozens of times. It had already been lived, felt, resolved, and reopened countless times before gaining a voice. The external silence never revealed how much you had already struggled alone. No one knows how many versions of that dialogue you rehearsed. No one sees the hours you spent organizing arguments, anticipating objections, testing tones. To the world, it was just a conversation. To you, it was the culmination of something that had been consuming mental space for a long time. And there's a strange loneliness in that, knowing that all that internal process was invisible, that the other person entered the conversation without knowing you'd been in it for days. Perhaps that's what makes some interactions so disproportionate. Not because what was said is serious, but because what was thought beforehand was too dense. Because you had already lived through it so many times that the real version seems like just a belated echo of battles that have already been fought and concluded within you. And then you realize maybe the longest conversations of your life never left your mind. And maybe that's okay, because sometimes processing in silence is the only way to be ready for what still needs to be said. There are conversations that never need witnesses to be real. They happen in the silence of thought, where every word is carefully considered, every tone is chosen, every reaction is anticipated, and even if the world never knows about them, these conversations shape how you process what you feel, organize what you think, and decide what is worth saying. There's nothing wrong with that. Mentally rehearsing isn't a weakness. It's simply the mind's way of dealing with the complexity of existing between what you feel and what you don't yet know how to express. Sometimes, the most honest conversation you have is precisely the one no one listens to. And if any part of this resonated with you, if you recognize something from your own internal process, know that you're not alone in this. If you'd like, subscribe to the channel for more reflections like this. And if you feel like sharing your experience, the comments section remains open, because perhaps the most important conversation isn't the one you have, but the one you finally understand.